Welcome to the Wrestling Still Cool podcast. My name's Cam. That's Mark.
Hey, y'all doing? Appreciate y'all joining in.
Before we get into it, you can follow us on Twitter at WrestlingSCool and go ahead and go with the rest.
For Instagram, it's at Wrestling Still Cool. Facebook, Wrestling Still Cool. TikTok is at Wrestling Still Cool 90. You can get us on email at WrestlingStillCool@gmail.com.
All right, so this episode is going to be a little bit different. We haven't done anything in like this format previously. But between the things that go on between myself and him personally, as well as kind of acknowledging the fact that with Darkside of the Ring, they're going to be covering Chris Kanyon, or not necessarily covering Chris Kanyon, but Chris Kanyon's stories can be part of that. It's more or less the mental health, and as it relates to both himself, myself, and the wrestling product or fan base or what have you, as in its own.
This is probably, in my view, we haven't talked about specifically. Probably the most important episode we've ever have covered on our podcast, and I'd say probably most important we probably will ever cover, because it's such a sensitive subject of very important subject of mental health, which is just as important as your physical health. And alongside mental health, there's also covering it as well as the unfortunate thing of addiction to alcohol and drugs, and which is not everybody goes that avenue while they're suffering from mental health, but many people do, of course. And we'll be covering now. This episode is wrestling business, but also people in general in society. So to y'all out there suffering with mental health, we understand. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ever since I would probably say I was probably about 12, I kind of suffer with a form of depression one way or another. Mm-hmm. It's also acknowledging the fact that I have it's not properly diagnosed, but I have all the traits of ADD. And the problem with that that it can create anxiety, and overwhelmness. So, like, a good example of it that makes it a little bit difficult with ADD is my mind will travel to 5 different places at the same time and try to get me to do all those things, and not being able to do all those things, or not having a plan to be able to accomplish all those things that my mind says, okay, I got to do this. It does create an anxiety. Like, you get anxious on, well, what happens if I don't finish this? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if all these different scenarios? And then it goes full circle into depression. It's a family trait. Several people in my family have been diagnosed with it. I have to use certain tactics to kind of move along with my life with it. I do what I call like a planted distraction, or controlled distraction. So, like, if I had to focus on something, if I hear noise or anything, kind of movement, my mind will be like, oh, go check that out. Oh, what was that? Or if someone plays a song, I'm going to have to look up the name of the song, kind of thing. So what I typically would do is, if there's something that I have to focus on, I put on something on the TV and have background noise or some kind of movement that I had absolute control over. And so one of those tactics that work for me. And he was right. A lot of people do resort to drugs or alcohol, things of that nature. I'm not trying to say I'm better than anybody by any means, but I typically don't go that route when dealing with depression. One of the things that I found that helped me myself is some sort of creativity, whether it be coloring, whether it be drawing, writing, doing music, what have you. I have found that if I'm usually doing a creative doing a creative outlet, I usually have a little bit more control over it. And unfortunately, some people aren't always that lucky.
Oh, absolutely. It's I know you for a long time, so I know you have that struggle and other struggles, obviously, which you're saying with depression, anxiety, and so forth, so on. It's a very tough ball game to deal with. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And myself, Mine go.
Oh, before you go into it, I also do have a therapist.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think obviously we talked about that, and yeah, therapist, nothing wrong with therapy. Therapy is a huge part. It's a big helpful thing, and different types of therapy too that are good therapy. Very good use for that. And myself, same thing with you. It's a family trait, anxiety, but mostly on my mom's side. Uh, Many years anxiety and mainly anxiety and like OCD types, symptoms and so forth. I'm at anxiety very young age, dating back as far as I can possibly remember. The OCD was I think more just something that came off my grandfather. He had OCD, and it just kind of grew on. Anxiety and depression as a kid, and it obviously didn't help. When I was a young kid, for a long time, got bullied, so didn't very much help. And other things in that different situations happened were bad issues, and then that grew on with PTSD. So still suffering anxiety and depression and PTSD, and seen a lot of people. I was just like yourself, seen a lot of people that have that mind, through life, and then of course being in the business, country music business, for 13 years now. A lot of the business side kind of gets my. It didn't help with the anxiety, but I mean I love what I do with that part. But that certain things didn't lead into more the good direction, and I'm one of those that I've been a drinker for pretty much a consistent drinker since I was 21 and about 14 years. There's been a time or two I took a slight little break, but it got worse and worse and worse. And then, for so many years, been an alcoholic. It just got worse about a couple years ago, about a year and a half ago. Close enough to say 2 years ago. It took me over the edge when I found the so-called joy of hard liquor, and that became my, unfortunately, pretty much my best friend. And it's odd to say that, but it's to where liquor was at my side all the time, and it even got into where it was even at work, day job stuff sometimes. That didn't come in much later. But when I was working at my desk at home, there was a bottle of liquor all the time around me, and beers. That was always a thing around me. And of course, I always used to use tobacco for probably about the last 20 years now. That's obviously helps out the anxiety too, but that's not good either, obviously. For the past 6 months, I just came up just a couple of days ago. 6 months now, I've been a recovering alcoholic, and I've begun to be an open book about it. I don't mind talking about it. I don't advertise as far as like I don't wear a T-shirt that says I'm an alcoholic, but social media I brought it up before, and I've been fortunate enough to where I've been able to inspire a couple people to get help. So I would tell it to anybody it's not about wanting to quit. I don't want. That's cool if you want to quit, but that's not what I want to. If you're ready to quit, your DOC, then that's where once you can accept you have a problem and you're ready. And it's more or less that you want to be ready, then you obviously try to seek help. And I'm fortunate enough to where I was in the right spot at the right time. Former boss of mine, he knew I was having obviously. Well, Cam knows. I had a huge mental breakdown in 2020. Just like a lot of people had issues in 2020, but mine didn't have nothing to do with the pandemic at all. It was career oriented and alcohol oriented. Mental health was bad, but my career took a bad. It sunk for SUNK. I don't want to say stunk. It sunk really bad, and I had to go I had to go sit on the sideline for a while, and it just got worse. And then got a point to where I had a mountain of liquor bottles in my house. If I felt like building something, I could have built a pyramid. But yeah, and the thing about like alcoholics, especially when I'm in my support group and my sponsor, it's more we can laugh at ourselves a little bit, but it's like it's weird is when you're having somebody else say something wrong or laugh at you, it's a different feeling. So it's like I can chuckle here and there, but it's a rough ball game. And obviously a lot of wrestlers and athletes and everybody else, or not, a lot of people. That's the key word. Say a lot of people resort to drugs and alcohol. I've never been. I've never used narcotics, so I can't speak on that part of it. But and what they would call drinking hell and back. I just watched a movie. I told Cam about this a little bit. I watched a movie called The Way Back that stars with Ben Affleck just recently, and I was like, man, I watched that movie, man. It's like it was all looking at a mirror, just seeing what Ben Affleck in real life was actually a recovering alcoholic too, and so it was interesting to see that. I just recently found that out too. Honestly, just about I don't know within a month ago. But anyways, well, yeah, it's for y'all that are alcoholics out there, and you can accept the fact. I hope you get help. If some people are just not ready to accept it, and it's a rough ball game. And from my own experience, I can tell you it's a mountain to climb, but the view is so beautiful once you get past a certain point. I'm still new to the game, but the withdrawals were absolute hell. But it was worth it. Every day is a recovering part, and we'll talk more about that later on the podcast. Let's get to some different subject, different some wrestling.
Well, right. So the main inspiration behind this episode is the fact that Darkside of the Rings will be covering Chris Kanyon, which, if you guys don't know at this point, Chris Kanyon was a wrestler from the 90s, early 2000s. He was regarded one of the innovators, as well as like an amazing technical wrestler. But at the time, he was a gay wrestler, which at that time was not as accepted as it would be now. And he had issues with it. Before going to what Kanyon did in the ring, fortunate side effect is, with his I believe he had bipolar as well. And in his depression, he actually took his own life. I want to say in 2000 and I think it was 2006, if I remember correctly. He took his own life, and it's unfortunate, but
yeah,
he, and I think when it comes to Kanyon, if he was still around, he would probably be a coach with the Performance Center. Kanyon came into the WCW as a character that they have portrayed called Mortis, which is based off the Mortal Kombat video games. He was one of the three characters that WCW put out based off of Mortal Kombat. You had Mortis, you had Wrath, and you had Glacier. And they were supposed to be like these karate fighting people. He eventually became his own character, somewhat tied to the flock and things like that. He did a move which actually is still used today. It's kind of like a rock bottom, but if you look up the Mr. Kennedy's mic check, it's a very similar type move. It was called the flatliner. A lot of people stole that move from him.
Yeah, it was a very good pioneer move back then.
Yeah, and much of the way the DDP brought moves out of nowhere, and honestly, kind of what everyone came to know Randy Orton for, that was kind of started by Kanyon. Kanyon had a lot to do with that. He was one of those that if he could make a move, he would make it, put it on TV, and people would steal it. He was part of, if you're familiar with a Hurricane, especially if you saw this year's Royal Rumble,